Shane is a postmodern Western, one which is shockingly ahead of its time in the sense of its depth of self-examination, both of Westerns and of American films in general. The movie has a vaguely Zoroastrian sense of morality. What I mean by this is that it separates and then personifies good and evil, portraying both in ways which are caricatured. Good is blonde, evil is dark-haired. Good is protective, evil is predatory. Good fights against all odds, evil fixes the odds in its own favor. Both good and evil are competent, both good and evil are skilled, and though there is eventually one winner, good can't defeat evil without great cost to itself. Representing good and evil as human characters isn't revolutionary, even for this time. If anything, the lion's share of Westerns did something similar. What makes Shane different from other Westerns, though, is the self-referential nature of those characters. The things written into the script which seem to clearly delineate them as not only archetypes, but archetypes which are designed to be examined and critiqued as archetypes. An example of how this is done can be seen with the histories and futures of these characters. Shane, almost miraculously, seems to not only appear out of nowhere, but appear at just the right time to be able to help the Starrett family in their times of most need, which, coincidentally, happens to be the time when they're in conflict with the film's representation of evil. Because of this, it could almost be interpreted quite literally as Shane being some sort of guardian angel or avenging figure sent by heaven to right wrongs which appear on Earth. While this interpretation is unnecessary, the ease at which the film could be seen in this light says a lot about its simple moral compass. The moral compass in question is so simple that it defies good taste in storytelling and realism. Or, at least, it would do that if strictly telling a story, or strictly being realistic, was the film's goal in the first place. Instead, the movie trades in realism and relatable characterization for the purpose of making a point about good and evil, and, more than that, about our expectations in relationship to good and evil as viewers. Both good and evil, rather than being forces of primordial nature which exist beyond the more human characters, acting as their superiors or guides. Instead, the figures of good and evil here are the lapdogs for the conflict among more banal humanity. In many ways, they don't seem to exist as anything other than lapdogs. And as characters, their motivations are one note, so much so that when Shane succeeds with defeating evil, his response is to leave the frame, the film, the land, or even the mortal coil itself, almost suggesting that the life for the hero outside of the confines of narrative is its own death. The much discussed ambiguity of the ending, where Shane exists in a state between life and death, his horse being his unit of animation, succeeds in the way that all ambiguous endings do. It forces you to engage with the central question between any dichotomy. What difference does it make? The fact for Shane is that having never been given a past as far as us viewers are aware, he also has no direction which would be his natural lot for the future. Because of this, his first appearance in the frame and his last exiting beyond its outer edges almost functions as a birth and a death itself. This is the lot of all characters in fiction, as they only exist insofar as they are represented to us. But Shane, as a character, doesn't even have an afterlife in the form of the spoken word. In a way, Shane is almost a biography film, one which follows a central character from his birth until his very death. But in this case, the entirety of the character's life is defined and revolves around a single act of good. The meta nature of the film is further accentuated by Joey, the child character, who looks on at Shane with all the excitement that children look on at other heroic figures, both real and fictional. In some ways, Joey is supposed to represent us, the one who has the least control over the world we're stuck witnessing, and therefore the one who influences the world only through rooting for its various characters, relating to them, and being inspired by them. Joey has a life after the film, where Shane doesn't. He will live on and exist within the same trade as his parents, as mundane as that is, but he will do so having a fire lit beneath him, one which, it's heavily implied, will influence his actions from the events of this film forward. His viewing of the shootout in the end, his eyes wide, and his invisibility to the other characters in the bar perfectly places him in the same position as us as viewers. In a way, it's almost as if he himself is peeking beyond the curtain, witnessing the platonic forms of good and evil, separated from the larger phenomenal world outside as they lock horns in their eternal conflict. Evil loses, but it always does. Good succeeds, but it rides out into the outer world broken, perhaps fatally so. Shane, like many characters in Westerns, rides out into the sunset, but he rides there under ambiguous circumstances. In the end, his victory doesn't belong to him, it belongs to others, to those he fought on behalf of. To those he fought for without receiving or requiring anything in return. In the end, he's no different than the guns he touted as tools earlier in the film. The only difference is, guns become good or bad based on who carries them. Shane, as a gun, finds the palm and trigger fingers of those who are already good or who are in need of good, and when his trigger is finally pulled in their service, he rattles and falls to pieces.